The origins of the War on Terror go back as far as the Second World War. Second World War had bankrupted many of the colonial powers, specifically Britain and France, and they were forced to give up many of their colonies in the Middle East. And within these colonies became a power vacuum, and different political movements were able to take advantage of decolonialization and were able to seize power in a variety of countries around the Middle East. The ones that we're going to talk about the most in the upcoming videos are going to be Iran, Iraq, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Now, the three movements that we're going to talk about are Republicanism, Islamism, and the royal family. The first one we'll look at is Republicanism. These were represented by mainly the Ba'ath Party, which was in power in both Syria and in Iraq. The gentleman in the middle here is the Ba'ath Party leader of Syria, and he was the president of Syria. His name is Hafez al-Assad. His name might sound familiar to you because his son is now the president of Syria and is one of the leaders of Syria in that civil war. The gentleman he is talking to here on the left is Saddam Hussein. He was the leader of the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. The next part of this political, military, geographical triangle is Iran. And in 1979, they had a revolution in Iran. It was an Islamist, fundamentalist revolution against the Iranian royal family. It was called the Shah. And their leader was this gentleman pictured here. His name is Ayatollah Khomeini. They were kind of the first real countries to kind of come out and denounce the United States and to declare a holy war or a jihad against the United States. The other thing that made Iran distinct from many of the other countries in the Middle East was that the majority of Iranians are what are called Shia Muslims. Which would make them different than these gentlemen here who are Sunni Muslims. In particular, people in Iraq, Saddam Hussein was Sunni Muslim. However, much of his politics was secular, and he was not he wasn't driven by religion in his politics. Ayatollah Khomeini absolutely was, and he did not like Sunni Muslims, least of which he did not like the royal family, which the royal families of the Arabian Peninsula did not like Ayatollah Khomeini either. This is the king of Saudi Arabia. His name was King Fahd, Sunni Muslim, extremely rich. He's just one of the many royal families in the Middle East. Other ones including in Kuwait and UAE and Qatar and Oman and all these other oil-rich countries they have royal families that had been in charge of these countries for centuries, and they had a vested interest in keeping them. So they didn't trust the Republicans like Assad or Hussein. They certainly didn't trust Ayatollah Khomeini, and none of these people really trusted each other. So we have like a triangle here, but it was clear that Saddam Hussein was kind of going to be the main player in the Middle East, despite Saudi Arabia and Iran being there. So this was a very nasty political, military, geographical triangle that was going to play itself out, and these three would go to war with and against each other within the span of 10 years. The first people to go to war against each other was Iran and Iraq. They fought a bloody war against each other for about 8 years. It was between 1980 and 1988. They fought to a bloody stalemate. The United States was supplying Iraq with a lot of funds. This is the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, shaking hands with Saddam Hussein. This would be a very embarrassing photo for him. Many years later, the Soviet Union was supplying Iran, so of course the United States was going to help out the enemy of the Soviet Union. The war bankrupted Iraq, although they received some assistance from Saudi Arabia and Oman and UAE for defending the Sunni countries against the Shia Iran. Iraq was not given a whole lot of compensation back, and that was a bit of a sore spot for Saddam Hussein. He felt as though he was protecting the Sunni world and the Arab world against the Persians and then the Shia in Iran. And he felt as though they should have gotten some money back for this kind of thing from these oil-rich countries that didn't have large militaries. So what was Saddam Hussein going to do about that? Well, he picked the smallest of the oil-rich countries that he could find, and he invaded it and took all their money. And that would be Kuwait. And in 1990, I believe it was in August of 1990, he rolled into Kuwait and Kuwait City with his tanks, and he took all of their money. This did not please many of the other oil-rich countries around here, and this made them extremely nervous because what was going to stop Saddam Hussein from driving down these desert highways to Riyadh and taking all the money in Saudi Arabia and UAE and taking all the oil? So this was very much a threat. So what was the Saudi Arabians going to do? Well, they needed some help. They didn't have a large military, but they had lots of money to spend to have militaries come help them. One military organization that wanted to help him and to defend his homeland was Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, the veteran of the Afghan war, fighting the Soviet Union. He had a very effective military force, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and he was willing to come home and save Saudi Arabia from Saddam Hussein. Osama bin Laden's family was very involved in Saudi Arabian politics and had a good relationship with the royal family. But ultimately, the Saudi Arabian royal family did not believe that Osama bin Laden's force would be enough. So they went out and found the most powerful country on earth to help them instead, and that was the United States. This is George Herbert Walker Bush. This is George W. Bush's dad. He was president of the United States at the time, and he decided that he was going to help out Kuwait and liberate Kuwait from Iraq. So he got a coalition of countries together. All the countries pictured in blue were going to fight against the country in orange, which is Iraq, and all the other countries in blue were going to fight them. So not only was Iraq outnumbered, but they were outclassed. They did not have as much quality weapons as the United States did. The United States had rolled out, the most sophisticated military organization and weapons that they had ever assembled. They had M1 Abrams tanks, they had F-117 stealth fighters, and Apache attack helicopters, all fighting on a desert plain. This was not going to be a fair fight at all. And the only real weapon that struck fear into the coalition led by the United States were these things called Scud missiles. They were missiles on wheels, as you can see, and they can be driven all around and hidden in the deserts and ravines and stuff like that, and shot from anywhere into places like Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. They shot a couple at Israel, trying to goad them into coming into the war. And they created quite a media buzz. It was kind of overblown. One of the interesting stories that came out of the Iraq War was the media coverage. The media had a field day with this. Places like CNN got tons of attention because of this war, because there was the first real war where the United States had a lot of positive media coverage, and the American public couldn't get enough. They certainly couldn't get enough of this guy here. He was named the Scud Stud. He was a war correspondent with, I believe it was with NBC or something, and he was tracking the Scuds. Like, that was his story, and his devilish good looks got him a lot of attention. The Scud Stud. He hasn't been heard from since. I think they might be making a movie about him soon, though. Anyways, this was not a very fair fight, as I said. The United States and the coalition forces had organized their forces along the border here in Kuwait, and they were going to invade Kuwait, get rid of all the Iraqi forces, and they did so. They had something called Operation Desert Storm. I think it was in January of 1991, and within a couple of weeks, all of Iraqi forces were just devastated. They were kicked out, and they were sent fleeing back to Baghdad. A lot of American and other coalition forces would have liked to have would have loved to keep going and drive all the way into Baghdad and kick out Saddam Hussein and take him out for good, and have a new regime in Iraq and in Baghdad. But the United States didn't do it. Saddam Hussein survived. George H.W. Bush decided that it wasn't worth the risk. He had an election coming, and he couldn't afford to get bogged down in a land war in Asia, so to speak. So he decided not to continue the war against Saddam Hussein, and he left him where he was. So that is the first chapter. This was called the Gulf War. We would have another Gulf War coming in the next video.